Howdy, guys and gals. So I am finally going to tell you about the third time that I went to Alaska. The third and final time. So if you look on my backup channel here, I've got a story time with Brenton, Alaska Part 1, story time with Brenton, Alaska Part 2, and there's a third time that I went to Alaska, and this will round out the trilogy. And for those that haven't seen the first two in a nutshell, the theme is I have gone to Alaska 3 times, and they've all been, you know, I wouldn't say they were like miserable failures exactly, but they just didn't work out. The first one was I went and worked on a crab processor, and that was, you know, you can go back if you have an hour of your, hour of your life to spare, you can go listen to that one. I never can seem to get these out quick, but I think this is going to be the quickest one, and it's probably the least, interesting one too. But you tell me. The second time I rode my bicycle from Northern California to Bellingham, got on a ferry and went to to Juneau, Southeast Alaska, with a friend of mine, and that didn't work out very good either, So, but here's the third time. So, and as you can see, for those that don't know, this is a standalone video more or less. I'm heading to Isle Royale right now. I'm on Lake Superior, and I'm doing a open water crossing from the canal, Hancock Canal. It's about 50 miles, and it's a little rougher than I was expecting, but it's, not a big deal. It's just kind of, not very pleasant, but it's not dangerous per se. Here, I'll show you. You can see that. So, yeah, if you come across this video and you're like, this guy sounds interesting, and well, this would be one of the least interesting videos I'd make. And head over to my other, my main channel, Backwaters and Backroads. Holy cow! And check that out, because I am making an Isle Royale series right now. So I would bet by the time you see this, at least some of them will be posted. So, and I've got over 300 other videos, ranging from shanty boat trips to scooter trips to interviews with interesting people. Yeah, backwaters and back roads on a budget. Okay, guys, let's see if we can get through this. I'm also having to keep the boat in the general direction of where I'm going in Isle Royale all day long. This is going to be an arduous journey, but we'll get there. Okay, so the third time I went to Alaska was actually only a few years ago. It was probably 2018, I want to say. And I've already been doing my channel, and I was doing a little series. I didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, you could argue I don't really know what I'm doing now, but I've gotten a little better at making videos and kind of keeping them organized and stuff. But back then, not so much. And I took my my little Reflex 250, my Honda Reflex scooter, and I left the UP, and I went all the way to the West Coast, and it was still kind of, early spring, so I went south, and then I went across Texas and New Mexico and Arizona and all that. And, I gotta get straight here. And I had a friend. I guess we can't really call each other friends anymore. I haven't heard from them ever since, but I guess I'm jumping ahead a little bit. But I have a friend, for a few years. I won't mention his name, and I know he's watched the channel. I don't know if he watches it now, but he, lives in Alaska. He's originally from Texas, but moved to Alaska, and he has done pretty good for himself. I mean, I won't get too much into the personal details about him, because that was part of the, what happened with this trip. But you know, he's had his troubles, and, you know, having to do with, like, let's just say substances, you know, and, but, you know, he's also, he's one of these people that I've met throughout my life, you know, where he has loads and loads of potential, and, you know, good-looking guy, and, you know, had a lot going for him. I should say has a lot going for him, and he recovered. He recovered from all of this. As far as I know, I haven't seen him since, you know, this trip that I'm going to tell you. But I'm assuming, you know, he's doing okay. You know, got a family, he's got a wonderful wife, and he's got a child, and maybe two now, I don't know. But back then, you know, he was kind of, I don't know. Let's see. This is why I've been postponing this video for so long, is because I don't know quite how to tackle it. But, you know, we were friends, stayed in touch. We met. I actually gave him a ride from the Pacific Northwest to the Midwest, you know, on a ride share. And then over the course of a couple of days, you know, got to know each other. And, you know, he knows a lot about the stuff that I, you know, am into, like boats and boating and fishing. And, you know, he spent a lot of time in Alaska. He's a boat captain, believe it or not, you know, like a certified one, and a cordon bleu chef. You know, he does a lot of cool stuff. Works in lodges mostly, you know, these gigs where, you know, remote lodges, gets flown in, meets celebrities, you know, rubs elbows with interesting people, country music stars and movie stars and CEOs that fly in on their own jets and stuff. I mean, he's had a very interesting life. And so, you know, we stayed in touch, and when I told him I'm going to be on the West Coast, you know, he was like, well, why don't you just come up to Alaska? Oh, hold on. Ah, that's a big one. Ah, there we go. As long as they don't get any bigger than that. You know, why don't you pop up to Alaska? I'm like, that sounds great. So he bought me a round-trip ticket to fly into Anchorage. I think, it was Anchorage. And, you know, it was pretty cheap. It was like $300. And, you know, he didn't need to buy it for me. I wasn't that broke. I mean, I could have bought it. But, you know, he, you know, was just kind of alluding to, like, well, when you come up here, you can help me with some stuff, with some projects, you know, and that'll kind of pay me back for the round trip. And I'm like, okay, that sounds good. And so I flew out of San Francisco, and it was a bit of a chore for me because, you know, I ended up in my hometown of Grass Valley, California, and San Francisco is about, it's about 180 miles away. And you know, I don't really know anybody down in San Francisco, so I kind of, you know, did some networking, and my friend Ed Burren, you know, the travel author, which I made a Nosy Beagle interview on my channel here about. You know, he's not originally from San Francisco, but he spent, you know, much of his life there, and he, you know, made a few calls, and he you know, found somebody that I could ride my scooter down there, and I could park the scooter in her garage. I mean, San Francisco is a shithole, you know. It was even in 2018, and, you know, if you just tried to chain your scooter up on the street or something, you'd most certainly be gone by the time you got back. So I rode down there, and I'm not a city guy, you know, like, it's stressful. I would rather be out here managing what we're looking at right now than the streets of San Francisco. So I rode down there, and I, you know, found the lady's house, and I parked it in her garage. She was very wary of me. I remember that, you know, she was kind of like, you know, well, this is kind of weird, you know, I haven't heard from Ed in a long time, and I think she, you know, people are on guard so much in these big cities and stuff, and so she didn't know me, and I just was trying to be as nice as I could, and thank you so much, and, you know, I'll call, or I'll, you know, let you know when I get back so you can unlock the garage and get my scooter and I can go home. So I took the mass transit down to the airport, and I got on the jet, you know, the plane, and I flew to Alaska. And yeah, my friend was, you know, there on the other end. He picked me up, and we, you know, I think he lived maybe an hour away or something, hour from Anchorage. I can't quite remember where he lives, but, you know, in that region. Excuse me. I'm getting off course here again. So So I went to his house, and I think he was renting a place, and his wife was, out of town. She was like visiting, I think, family in Tennessee with their fairly new baby. So it was just going to be my buddy and I, and but my buddy and I never really got to know each other very well. I mean, we emailed and texted and stuff over the couple years, that I met him, I mean, it was more than a couple years, like, 3-4 years. I think we crossed paths once. I came and visited him in Texas once. That actually didn't go very good either. He got arrested, and I almost got arrested. That's another side story, which, I mean, no one's ever going to be able to figure out who this is, so I can just kind of tell the story as long as I don't give his name. But I went and visited him down in Texas, and this was still when he was, doing a lot of drinking and smoking pot. And we went boar. I asked him if we'd go boar hunting, because that's always, something interesting to do down in Texas, And he's like, yeah, and we went and found some land, and we, had a couple of rifles, and we were just walking around the woods. So I parked my car, like on a side dirt road, and some asshole, called, because that's just what people do these days. And then we got back to, later at the end of the day, we got back to the car, and there's a sheriff there, and he's like, what are you guys doing, blah, 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 and we explained to him, and which we weren't really breaking any rules. I think we were on public land, and, you can hunt boars, boar, but my windows are cracked, and the sheriff stuck his nose in the car, and he smelled marijuana, which was my buddy's, and so he, I had to open the car and found it, and it was in my buddy's bag. And, I guess it's a big deal in Texas. It's not in other places. I mean, no one really cares in like more than half the country, but in Texas, at least then they cared. Probably still do. And they handcuffed us, and we kind of explained the situation. My buddy was very, honest about it. He's like, it's mine, and, and I'm like, well, it is his. And, we just explained the situation. And my buddy got arrested and taken to jail, and I wasn't. I got released. And so I went, I went back to his, he was staying with his girlfriend at the time, and I just went back to her house, and we hung out for a couple days, and, until my buddy got released, and I think I went and picked him up, or maybe she did or something, and it was just stupid. It was just it was a little bit of bad luck. It was a little bit of like being dumb and not very, we could have been a whole lot more cautious, and so, whatever. But it just added to his list of possession charges. And I know it sounds funny to say this, but, my buddy is actually a much higher quality person than what would normally be associated with what I'm describing, like drinking and drugs, like I think he's doing, I don't know, I shouldn't even say. I think he continues to, partake in THC products, let's put it that way. But I don't really consider that, I mean, I've explained this before in other videos, like I don't really consider that a drug, like it's just not in the same category as what I would call, what most people would call like, serious drugs. But, there's parts of the country where they don't feel that way. And I know my buddy doesn't drink anymore because that was his primary problem. I guess you'd say he still is an alcoholic. He's a recovered alcoholic. And, he stopped. And, that was wrecking his life more than anything. And, he went to AA and he, recovered. He's got Native American in him, and I think that was another, factor. So he got, once he stopped drinking, he really got his life back on track. He's, so anyways, okay. That was a sidebar. So we're up there in Alaska, and go back to his house. It's early spring. There's still snow on the ground. It's not cold winter, but it's definitely not nice weather. And, we're hanging out for a day or two, and of course, I whip my phone out, and I want to make a video being in Alaska. I'd already started, a video of it, like flying up there and being in San Francisco and stuff. And my buddy's like, this is, it's not going to work. Like, I don't want you turning your phone on, and I certainly don't want you aiming at me. I don't want you, showing any of my stuff. He's into a certain type of vehicle. Well, I'll just say it. I mean, no one's going to figure this out. He's into Range Rovers, like classic Range Rovers. And, he's got several of them. I mean, a couple of them are, worth quite a bit of money. And he didn't want me showing those on film, and didn't want me showing his place on, film and stuff like that. So it was kind of a bummer. It took me like a day to kind of let this sink in of like, oh, I'm not even going to be able to like chronicle being up here in Alaska really. And, but that's fine. I stopped turning the phone on. And, he also wanted me to do some, what he said, like do like $300 worth of work for him, which is like going out to his shop, his garage, and, working on vehicles, which I can do. I mean, I'm not like an expert mechanic, but I certainly can, fix things. And I would call myself, a moderate, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm like, I might be a 7, maybe a 7 out of a 10. I can fix a lot of stuff. If it's mechanical, like brakes and, things like wiring and computer module and stuff, forget it. But like, that classic stuff that he has, I can certainly work on it. So, that was another kind of bummer for me. I'm like, I kind of thought we were going to be doing something different here, like looking around Alaska. This was like vacation for me. And instead, he wanted me to just duck in and like punch a time card basically and do a bunch of work for him. So I did, for like a day or two. I packed bearings and, took stuff apart, and probably, he was rebuilding another Range Rover, and but it was like instantly became this like, he's my boss and I have to be conscious of my time, his time and my time and stuff. When I probably should have, in hindsight, I should have just said, I should have went in my wallet and said, here's $300, can we just forget about this whole working part, because I don't really want to be up here working. I'd rather hang out with you and go do some drives and go, look at boats, and they got awesome boats in Alaska, and let's go look at the scenery and go look at the mountain ranges and that kind of stuff. I don't want to be stuck in your garage packing bearings, for, I mean, how much am I getting paid, by the way? I mean, $10 an hour or something, I don't know. So it already, we were still fine up to that point, but it just, it was a strange situation. And so now okay, so this is like day 2 or 3, and my buddy, we're in the house in the evening or something, and my buddy's a really good cook because he's a professional chef. He's a camp chef, and he went to a college for this. I mean, he's basically a cordon bleu chef. And we're talking, and he's making some amazing meal. He's feeding me too. Like moose meat and wrapped in bacon and all sorts of amazing side dishes and stuff. And so, this is where I'll mention where this is where the problems really started, okay? So, people would call me a conspiracy theorist, okay? Now, I don't think I am. I think I'm just a realist. I think I'm just a conspiracy factualist. And I've developed in the past few years, an ability to kind of fit in more with what you could call the normies, people who don't see the world like that. Because I've learned that it's not worth it, it's not, there's lots of ways to talk about this. Like, you could say, like if you're using the Matrix analogy, you could say some people took the red pill, to see how far the rabbit hole really goes. And some people took the blue pill and they're just stuck in the Matrix. You could say some people are NPCs. If you want to use the video game analogy, they're just non-playable characters that are kind of going through life, taking the official narrative from the official sources of information, mainstream media and stuff, and they don't really question it. They don't really want to question it. And it's just better to leave that alone because it makes them nervous to question it, you know, and that stuff. Now, and it sounds derogatory when you talk about other people like this, like, and it can definitely sound superior, like a superiority complex, like, you know, well, I'm awake and I'm red-pilled and you're not. I'm not saying that at all, and I try I mean, I guess I can and do, depending on, you know, what company I'm in, but like, more and more, the older I get and the more just kind of wiser I get, I just kind of leave it alone for the most part. If I meet other, you know, quote-unquote conspiracy theorists, you know, we can talk all day long about red-pilled topics, and I'm not talking about things like, you know, did we go to the moon, and, you know, is space real, and, you know, like, I mean, that, you know, that kind of stuff, you know, is the earth flat, that kind of crap. Like, I don't go there. I mean, it's interesting, and I've certainly you know, looked into that stuff, you know, for fun, and I've got some opinions on subjects like that, you know, but you know, but when I mean by being conspiracy theorist is that you know, my worldview is generally that there are global elite that are running the planet, you know, and they always have, and, you know, a lot of times the official narrative is a big fat lie. It usually is. You know, the latest, you know, kind of coffee cough thing I won't mention, you know, like the you know, the thing that's been going on since about 2019 or so, you know, is nothing like what the official narrative is. You know, that would be an example I could say here that would make me, you know, at odds with, you know, other, like, people who don't have my general worldview. I hope that makes sense. You know, and when it first started in 2019, to continue to use that example, you know, it was a great divider. You know, I lost friends and I got alienated further from certain family and you know, but everybody did, not just me. You know, it was another great wedge in society of, like, some people see what it is. You know, it's a manufactured hoax that is designed to get you to take certain substances into your bloodstream, and they're not tested, and they're unprecedented, and they're coming from nefarious forces and things like that. Hopefully the YouTube AI bot will not blacklist me for just saying that, right? But who knows? But things you can't talk about here, okay? Not really, not directly. Now, I don't know what my buddy thinks about that particular subject, because it was actually, you know, this happened when I was up in Alaska and hung out with him, you know, right before this stuff started. I mean, it was like, you know, just a few months later. You know, it was like I was up in Alaska in 2018, and then like a few months later, 2019. I guess it's about a year later, you know, this stuff started, and I haven't heard from him, seen him since. But, you know, there's others. You know, he's not a. Not only is he not really a conspiracy theorist, he's kind of doesn't tolerate them very well either. At least he didn't back then. And so, you know, because I don't really know him very well, because it's just a whole lot of, like, texting pictures of catching fish and, you know, stuff like that, I never really knew his stance on reality and, you know, his worldview. And he probably didn't know mine very well either. I mean, we had little bits and, you know, pieces. Like, one time I visited him when he was working at a lodge in South Dakota, at a pheasant hunting lodge, and I think we had a little run-in once because I was talking about Alex Jones, and he was like, that guy's a nut, and I'm like, well, I don't think he's a nut. I mean, he comes across a nut sometimes, and I can certainly see why people think he's a nut, but he's actually telling the truth on most things. Well, I mean, he's trying to tell the truth on all things, in my opinion, and, you know, he gets a lot of stuff right. He's been vindicated over and over and over, you know, so, you know, again, that's not my opinion. That's all fact, you know, so whether people want to look into it and believe it or not, that's up to them. But my buddy, you know, is one of those, Alex Jones is a nut, you know, as an example. And so, go back to the night, you know, we were hanging out, he's in his kitchen cooking awesome meals, and I'm sitting there at the, you know, counter, you know, we're talking, and I'm one of these people who have a hard time with small talk, you know, I don't have, like, there's a line in Jerry Maguire where the sister of Renee Zellweger, you know, says, you know me, I'm incapable of small talk, you know, and it's like, And I always remember that. I mean, that whole movie's just loaded with gyms, right? But I remember hearing that and being like, that's me. I just have such a hard time with small talk. I can't talk about the weather unless, unless I'm on Lake Superior and I'm wondering if it's going to, put me in danger or not, that type of stuff. So, so I bring up one of my subjects, to my buddy, and it's one of those subjects you can't talk about here on YouTube, okay? And I guess what I could say is this. This is how, what another channel I watch, and I like very much, this is how he talks about this. Have you ever rented the movie Captain Hook? The movie Captain Hook, and and really studied it, like where it was filmed and stuff like that. So if you know what I'm talking about, then you kind of know, see, I can't mention it. I can't mention it here, or it'll get me in trouble. So I bring up, the Captain Hook video. And my buddy, kind of is listening, and I'm telling him, I think just information about, certain stuff. And I've had this problem before. This particular movie, Captain Hook, can really piss some people off, okay? I actually had a girlfriend for a long time, and she thought it was like one of her lines in the sand. She thought I was absolutely nuts, that I looked into and found some interesting things, not me, but lots and lots of people, about the movie, Peter Pan and Captain Hook. So my buddy, this was like his final straw. It kind of took me by surprise, but when I think back on it, I should have just, been keeping my mouth shut, because I did get plenty of warnings. And he basically was appalled. He was disgusted that I had this opinion about this movie, Peter Pan and Captain Hook, filmed in New England. And so, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, email me, okay? Like, if you come across this video and you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, I put my email in these description boxes on these videos, and email me, I'll tell you what I'm talking about. And so my buddy is just so appalled. He threw up his hands. He's just like, that's it. Like, this is crazy. You're crazy. I've had enough. And I thought it was an extreme reaction. I don't know why it would go to this length, but whatever. And he's like, I'm gonna change your ticket home early. Like, I'm gonna get an Uber tomorrow and stick you in it, and you're gonna go back to the airport, and you're gonna leave tomorrow. You're not staying here for like 10 days or whatever. And I'm like, holy cow! I mean, I was amazed. I was floored. I was surprised, and I also felt really trapped. I mean, there I was up in Alaska with, the country of Canada in the way, which always freaks me out. Especially more and more these days, Canada's just getting to be the most tyrannical government in, the Northern Hemisphere. And that's one reason why I would never settle in Alaska. I mean, Alaska's my type of place, don't get me wrong. And that's why I'm in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and the northern states. I like that kind of stuff. But, I would visit Alaska a lot more. I'd go on adventures and stuff, and I'd drive up there and take the boat, whatever, And I might still, take a ferry up there or something and just bypass Alaska entirely. But, I'm sorry, Canada entirely. But, I do remember being in Alaska and being like, man, I don't have anything up here. I don't have I have no way to get out of here other than flying out of here. And hopefully my buddy, taking me to the airport or whatever. So, and it really just left me kind of freaked out. Like, it kind of panicked me. And I told him that. I said, dude, I feel really trapped. I mean, like, you're I'm not gonna say he's freaking out on me. He's not like, having a fit, but he's, I upset him. I brought some subjects up and, that he just thought were unforgivable and appalling. Having to do with, okay, I'm gonna put say a couple other things so maybe people can try to decipher the hobo code is what it's called, okay? So, when we went to school, we had school lunches, right? We had school lunches, and at schools, and and then I bet you, like in places like Minnesota and stuff in the fall, when those kids got home, if their dads were into hunting and stuff, then they went, looking for, they go, shooting deer. They go hunting and shoot deer, after they got back from school, and then maybe in the evening, if they got, if they shot a deer, they would watch the movie Captain Hook, Peter Pan and Captain Hook. So hopefully that's enough, hobo code to you can figure out what I'm talking about. Okay, it was a thing I was really interested in for a while, and I did a ton of research on it. And it basically, once a person gets it, if they're capable of getting it, it just completely blows you out of the water and just completely changes your worldview entirely. If you can't get it and you come across people who, let's just say, do, then you'll look like they'll look like they're crazy. And that's probably the best way to describe what happened between my buddy and I. He just thought I was crazy. Lost my mind, one of these whack jobs. And probably, annoyed by the fact that I can't just talk about, more plain, things like, whatever. I should have just been asking questions about Alaska. I mean, I do. I mean, I was, but so I think it was probably, I'm still kind of having to guess, but it was a combination of maybe I wasn't working in his garage hard enough for $10 an hour, or something like that. And I'm a crackpot conspiracy theorist, and I talk about things that you know what you talk about, and so yeah, he kind of freaked out, and he's like, you're out of here. And even when I tell this story, if it was being told to me by somebody, I would be saying, oh, there's got to be something else. Something else must have happened. Something else must have been said. Okay. And not really. I mean, I might have also said something, kind of another one of these hot button topics that I might get on. I don't pull it out of the blue. I mean, it's got to be, especially these days. But another topic I've noticed just really freaks people out sometimes if you ever dare talk about it is, and another thing you really can't talk about here on YouTube. You really can't talk about reality here. That's really what it comes down to. Is this whole idea? I'll just put it this way. The 19th Amendment. If you look at what, the 19th Amendment of the Constitution, it basically expanded voting rights, okay, in America. I think it was 1920. Because it used to be only, men voted up until 1920. And then some things happened and it expanded the franchise of voting and democracy around 1920, if I'm not mistaken. And, and I looked into it. It's the crux of our problem that's destroying our society. And there's going to be a small segment of, my listenership, according to my analytics and my channel, on my other channel anyways, I don't know about this one, but, 98% of my viewers are male, and they're mostly around my age or older, So I don't have a lot of female, viewers. I got some cherished ones, like Janie. Hi, Janie. If you're listening to this, you're awesome soon, and, you're awesome. And she, she can handle dissident, opinions. I mean, we've talked on the phone and, had some disagreements about certain subjects, and she doesn't slam at the phone or tell me I'm a jerk and hang up or whatever. I mean, she can handle it. And I love that characteristic about people, personality trait. And then, there's alone in remote Alaska. I've never met her, but she's awesome. And, go check out her channel. If she wants to be associated with this video, she probably doesn't. But, generally speaking, if you ever try to talk about, let's just say, the 19th Amendment and the expansion of voting rights and how that was a big mistake, and that, women value security and generally, and men value freedom generally, and when you start voting and with that in mind, it can vastly change an entire society. And so, taking away certain rights from certain people. Maybe I can say that, okay? Well, that's another one. And I might have brought that up to my buddy too, like, oh, well, what would solve that problem is, because I can be opinionated when I get in the right mood, and I'd be like, well, what would solve that problem is, taking away certain rights from certain people in society. And that probably appalled him too, because he's not, he doesn't think like I do. And so, okay, so what happened? Next morning came around, I gathered all my stuff up, packed it in my bag as quick as I could. He was just freaking out. I was hoping he'd change his mind. by the morning, but he didn't. And I got in an Uber, and I had like an hour-long drive to the airport. Was an interesting guy. He was in the military, and he had like 7 kids. His wife was from Germany. He was black, and they, he just did this for extra money. And I had a really interesting conversation. I was still in shock. I mean, I couldn't believe I was going home after like 2 or 3 days, but whatever. I've been, I guess I could be a controversial figure in the right setting. So the guy took me back to the airport, and I redeemed my ticket, and I got back on a plane, and at the end of that day, I think I was flying back into San Francisco, and I had to, it was too late to get on public transit to get back to where my scooter was in like the Mission District or something. So I had to, do this crazy thing of like finding a place to sleep outside in San Francisco. I took the train back up into the city, one of the last ones, got lost, sketchy people on the subway. I've got a little footage of it on a video. I'll try to link it below. The series, it was called 2 Weeks on 2 Wheels, and the last one is not a very popular video because it really was so disjointed. I didn't have enough footage to really do anything with it. And I slept like in this hedgerow, and I remember putting on my headlamp and making sure there wasn't needles I was going to lay in, and poop, feces, which San Francisco is known for now. And I slept in this hedgerow, and there was just people, homeless people on the streets. It was an adventure, it was an adventure. I can handle myself for the most part, but and then the next morning I made it back to my scooter, and I remember having to tell the lady, I came back a little early, and didn't explain to her why. And she opened the garage, and I got all my stuff together, and I rode my Reflex back up to my hometown of Grass Valley, California, and that was that. I mean, I went to Alaska, and I was back home, including travel from the Bay Area and back twice, within like 3 days. And it was a whirlwind, and it was crazy. And it was all because I'll say yes to just about anything if it has to do with adventure. And I went, to Alaska and met a fella that I really didn't know very well, and I don't know. I would love to know why. I mean, if he watches this video, hey, you could, I'm not mad at you. Feel free to email me or text me or whatever. So yeah, that was my 3rd trip to Alaska, and I don't know what it is about that state and me that something never seems to work out, but I do plan on going back, sooner than later. I'll probably put the Bigfoot camper on my truck, and I'll book a expensive ticket some fall or something, and then not so distant future in Bellingham, and load it up, and then try to get to Haines, I think is where the road picks up again to the mainland. And I'd like to spend 2 or 3 weeks tooling around Alaska and seeing some of the cool sights. You can never see Alaska, I think, and it would take a long time to see it all. It's a huge state. I would, take the Alcan up, but I got a traffic ticket back in the 90s speeding in a construction zone. Excuse me. That in Canada is the same offense regimen as a DUI. Okay, so I've never had a driving under the influence. I've never had a DUI. I never, drunk driving. I never had one of those in my whole life, and I'm thankful for that. Thank God. But I've had a lot of traffic tickets, mostly a long time ago. They really stopped, like in the 2000s. I started getting a little smarter and about it, got older, wiser. But, certainly back in the 90s and stuff, I was like, I sat in jail for 2 weeks over Christmas break during college because I had thousands of dollars in traffic tickets I didn't take care of, and I had a warrant out for my arrest and I didn't have any money. So back in California, I went and sat in jail for 2 weeks. I'll remember that really well. So, my dad used to say, "You think the rules don't apply to you." And I used to mumble under my breath, "The rules shouldn't apply to anybody." But I certainly don't feel that way now. I was just young and dumb. And I try to follow, I'd say that, I follow the good laws. I follow the good laws and the good rules. And, I just hide in plain sight for the rest of them, so, which is what I would recommend everyone should do. But that's a sidebar. But yes, I would like to go back to Alaska. I'm going to really, do it right next time, as right as I can. Oh, the point I had is that I used to go into Canada quite often back in like 2007, 8, 9, 10. Twice a year, I would visit friends in Newfoundland, and I went all over Canada. And then one time I went to cross over, and some asshole, total asshole, border guy, did this deep dive for like an hour and pulled me off in this room and found this ticket that I had. He would have found something, regardless, okay? And what he latched onto was a ticket I got speeding in the construction zone back in the 90s in Wisconsin, of all places. And that, they marked me down as being barred from entering Canada unless I go through a bunch of paperwork and spend hundreds of dollars back then, to get it cleared, which I never did. I threw up my hands after that. I was like, I'll tell you this other little thing. I was in a Geo Metro. I used to sell them. I'd fix them, sell them, and I had one for myself. They get like over 50 miles a gallon. They're pretty amazing. But so do Echoes and stuff. That's why I drive those. Much more reliable. But, the guy just didn't like the look of me. I was like in, kind of summer mode and hippie mode. I was wearing like sandals and bandana on my head, driving my little Metro with my sleeping bag, all my gear in the back. And I think he just decided, like, this guy shouldn't be, be having freedom. He's a scumbag. And on the way out, they actually they must have been practicing or something. They had these spikes, these spiked boards, and they were slowly, as I was driving out of the kind of detention area that they put like people, cars and vehicles and people in while they're doing their research if they pull you over, they were sliding it in front of my car and telling me out the window to drive 5 miles an hour to this certain gate. Like I was gonna gun it, and they're gonna have to pop my tires and shoot me, I guess. It was so stupid. It was like such an eye-opening thing for me. Just be like, the world's gone crazy. This is all theater. People, they just justify their existence. Officials are paranoid. There's a bunch of endless morons that'll put on a costume and, bully other people because that's what they get off on. They love these type of jobs, okay? TSA and border, and I'm not saying they're all bad, and there needs to be a certain amount of, let's just call it, security, okay? But give me a break. It was so dumb. Like, what am I gonna do? Gun it into the gate and have them riddle me full of, holes? And so they, have these spike boards, and then I had to go over to the American side and explain it to them. And they're like, man, you must have did something really wrong for them to be treating you like that. And I'm like, no, not at all, actually. And I told them about it, and they're like, and they laughed. Like, that's one of the pettiest ones I've ever heard. But yeah, they're getting more strict, and it's probably because you're driving an old car and you don't look like you have a lot of money, and they just didn't want you in the country, and they, found some reason to, not that they even need a reason, they can just not like the looks of you. That's what it's come down to. So that's another sidebar as to why I don't just pick up and go to Alaska, which is a bummer, because it's, I'm an American, Alaska's America. And I always said the biggest problem with Alaska is Canada's in the way. So not much we can do about that. So I won't be, if I went to Alaska, I would do it like Goldie did, and I would just go there and stay for good. Maybe fly home once in a while. But I don't know how much longer we can even fly without, taking the magic jabs, okay? So that's that. That's the story. That's the third time I went to Alaska. It was a failure. I was in Alaska for like, 60 hours or something. It was just so dumb and a waste of time. At least I didn't have to pay for the ticket. So, okay, guys. Thank you so much for listening. I hope this kind of like bearing soul, bearing one's heart videos like this are interesting to folks. I mean, it must be to a few hundred people because, they get watched by a few hundred people. I think these story times, actually get more views than the average kind of, supplemental video that I put up from my main channel. So that's good. And, thank you for that. thank you for your time. Always, every video of mine you ever watch should just go without saying thank you for giving me a little bit of your time, and I hope it's been worth it. So, okay guys, I'm gonna show you. We're slowly making our way to Isle Royal. 35.5 miles left. Started at 50. This is really slow. I'm going about 6 miles an hour to save fuel. If you're interested in that, those are much better quality videos. And go over to my main channel. It's linked below, Backwaters and Backroads. And that's it. Catch you later.